Welcome to the next installment of the Train Vicar. This video is about trains and public transport in the Southland and Otago regions of New Zealand, both in the past and now.
Last year, we went on holidays to the Southland and Otago region.
We went to Kinloch on Lake Wakatipu near Glenorchy up there. We enjoyed our time on the shores of the lake, and from there we also walked into the Humboldt Mountains a bit, both to near Bold Peak and to Glacier Burn. Later on, we travelled to Fiordland and enjoyed an amazing multi-day cruise through Doubtful Sound. We also walked a bit near Te Anau and stayed in mountain huts. On the way back north, we rode the Taieri Gorge Limited train through the impressive landscape of that river gorge. We covered quite a few kilometers on our travels, but as the road droned on, I was getting tired and restless. Personally, I don't mind car journeys of half an hour or so, but if it's more than an hour, it's just a pain, I think, even with the interesting landscape to look at. As I was driving along, I noticed that in many places there either used to be a railway line or there still was a perfectly good railway line not far from the road, but there were no passenger trains that were using those anymore. So I wondered whether we could have done our holidays in the past and gone most of the distance by train. So I checked out the 1966-1967 South Island passenger timetable. It turns out we couldn't have done it exactly the same way back then if we had gone by public transport. But with a similar travel pattern, we would have getting to those places would still have been possible. Now, it would have required some planning and probably one trip by taxi if we wanted to go to all those destinations within approximately the same time frame. So here's the plan. I'll leave on the Thursday morning at 8:40 a.m. from Christchurch with the Limited Express. That would arrive in Dunedin at 3:49 p.m. Then there we could change to the Dunedin Alexandra railcar, which leaves Dunedin at 4:35 p.m. And this meant through the Taieri Gorge, so we've ticked that off, and arrival in Alexandra was at just 9:05 in the evening. From there, we would have to catch the bus to Cromwell, leaving Alexandra at 9:25 p.m. and arriving at Cromwell at 10 p.m. Only on Friday and Sunday would the bus have continued on to Queenstown, so we might have had to stay the night in Cromwell on the Thursday and then catch a taxi to Queenstown on the Friday morning. Now, I think that's my taxi ride, which I had to plan in, and I think it probably should have been possible back in 66, 67. In Queenstown, the Earnslaw departed 3 times a week to the head of the lake. The ship left Queenstown at 8:30 in the morning and took approximately 3 hours to Glenorchy and Kinloch. I think that would have been way more comfortable than driving along the winding road from Queenstown to Glenorchy and then on to Kinloch. The imaginary 1967 travel would then take us back on the Monday on the steamship Earnslaw, departing Kinloch at around 3 p.m. and arriving back into Queenstown at around 6 in the evening. We would then have had to stay in Queenstown overnight. On the Tuesday, a bus travelled from Queenstown to Lumsden, where we could have changed to another bus to Te Anau, arriving there at 2:55 p.m. Over the next few days, we would have had the chance to explore the area near Te Anau and go on a tour from Manapori to Doubtful Sound. Then, on the Saturday, we would have travelled all the way from Manapori to Christchurch in one day, most of the distance by train. So the bus leaves Manapori at around 10:30 in the morning, arriving in Lumsden at 12 noon. From there, the bus to Gore departed at 1:10 p.m. The railcar to Christchurch left Gore at 2:35 p.m., arriving in Christchurch at 11:35 p.m.
In the 1990s, it would still have been possible to catch a train to Otago and Southland. So for the purposes of our holiday, here, the Southerner, this one, we could have caught that from Christchurch to Dunedin, and then from there a bus on to Queenstown later the same day. So we would have arrived in Queenstown that very same day at 7:35 p.m. From there probably would have been a shuttle available in around the Lake Wakatipu, and I know at that time there were still a few boats operating to the Greenstone Valley and to Kinloch. Then there were buses available from Queenstown to Te Anau daily. Initially in the 1990s, for the return service, there was a connecting bus from Te Anau to Goa, where it connected with the Southerner. But the problem was that the Southerner only ran Monday to Friday. It would not have run Saturday, so that would have curtailed our holidays somewhat. Later on in the 1990s, as intercity coach lines separated from the Transcenic and the passenger rail, there was no connection between the bus that came from Te Anau and Gore. But in the mid-1990s, we could have travelled again a bit further through the Tyree Gorge by rail to connect to Queenstown. Here is the Queenstown connection, which was the Southerner train from Christchurch to Dunedin, and then the Tyree Gorge train from Dunedin to Pukerangi, and then a connecting coach that departed Pukerangi at 5:20 p.m., arriving in Queenstown at 9:30 p.m. Nowadays, it's still possible to get to many of these places by bus, of course not by train, but I think it's a bit difficult to get to Kinloch. You would either need to book a taxi or a shuttle service there. But the cost for a family would be quite high. And in my experience, the intercity coach drivers, at least here in the South Island, are quite rude. So it wouldn't have been probably the most enjoyable experience.
While travelling has become quicker in the last 50 years in New Zealand, long-distance public transport has suffered considerably. Now people just about require a car if they want to see this beautiful country. No longer can they travel major distances by rail. For some people, that makes travel a lot more difficult and certainly for me a lot more unpleasant. Now, some people may regard it as progress, but I think a lot has been lost in that. I think in modern society, there is the myth of progress, that things always get better. This myth persists, probably with a view to the technological improvements that we experience. But even with those technological advancements, there's always some loss. Just think of those fancy smartphones. But with the use of those phones, society has encountered many new problems. So the changes are not always just positive. Also, many people think that we are wiser and more advanced than the people of yesterday, those medievals or people like that. The contemporary is seen as better. Now, that includes things like the design of houses or household goods, and also morals and beliefs. But when we examine that a bit closer, we get to realize that the modern is not always better than the old. In fact, to a certain extent, as we read less and become more polarized, we certainly do not become wiser. So I would argue that such a loss has also occurred in the field of faith. We have lost much. The church has become often irrelevant or has adjusted very much to modern trends without critical reflection. Some may see it as positive, but many people would acknowledge that at least some good has been lost in that as well. So in this video, I haven't only shown you some timetables, which I quite am into, but it also maybe, asks the questions, what have we lost in recent years?